Hey there! Tonight we're stepping back in time to a world of marble columns, steaming pools, and the distinctive sound of bronze scrapers against oiled skin. Welcome to the Roman Baths, where an entire civilization gathered not just to get clean, but to socialize, exercise, conduct business, and occasionally get into arguments about whose toga was blocking the cold plunge. If you've ever wondered what it was like to spend an afternoon in ancient Rome's most popular gathering spot, settle in, because we're about to find out. Before you drift off, take a moment to like this video and subscribe if you enjoy these historical journeys into sleep. Tell me in the comments where you're listening from and whether your local gym has tried installing a heated floor system yet. I read them all, usually while trying to figure out how the Romans managed without towels that actually dried anything. Now, dim those lights, get comfortable, maybe adjust your pillow like a Roman would adjust their cushions in the caldarium. The ancient Romans would probably insist you're lying down wrong, but they insisted about everything, so don't worry about it. Let's begin. You stand at the entrance of the Baths of Caracalla on a warm afternoon in the year 215 CE. The building before you rises like a small mountain, its walls faced with brick and marble that catches the Mediterranean sun. The sound reaches you first, a low hum of hundreds of voices echoing from within, punctuated by splashes, laughter, and the occasional shout of a vendor hawking wine or pastries. The smell is complex. Olive oil, sweat, perfume, burning wood from the furnaces, and something else, something distinctly human and alive. The baths are free today. They're free most days, actually, though you might pay a small fee on special occasions. The emperor wants his citizens clean, entertained, and grateful. You join the stream of people flowing through the entrance, a cross-section of Roman society that would be impossible to gather anywhere else. Senators in expensive tunics walk beside laborers still dusty from the construction sites. Women in silk stolas chat with shopkeepers' wives. Children dart between legs like schools of fish. You pass through the apodyterium, the changing room, where hundreds of niches line the walls. Each niche is meant for one person's belongings, though the system relies heavily on hope and the occasional bribe to the attendant who's supposed to watch everything. You strip off your tunic, fold it carefully, and place it in an empty niche. A slave offers to guard your things for a few coins. You decline, having already hidden your money in your sandal, a trick everyone knows and no one admits to using. The air changes as you move deeper into the complex. It grows warmer, damper, scented with oils and unguents. You're wearing nothing but your bare skin now, which is perfectly acceptable here. Romans have complex rules about modesty in public, but the baths operate under different logic. Here, bodies are just bodies, tools to be maintained like any other piece of equipment. Your first stop is the palestra, the exercise yard. The space is enormous, open to the sky, surrounded by columns that cast long shadows across the sandy ground. Men are wrestling in pairs, their bodies slick with oil. Others practice with weights, lifting lead spheres that would challenge modern athletes. A ball game is in progress, players shouting and diving for a leather sphere stuffed with hair. The game has no clear rules that you can discern, or perhaps everyone's making them up as they go.
You join a group practicing with the halteres, stone or lead weights shaped like telephone receivers that you would hold in each hand. The exercise is simple. Swing them in rhythm, building strength in your arms and shoulders. The man next to you is clearly irregular. His weights move in perfect arcs while he discusses the latest chariot races with his neighbor. You manage to keep up, more or less, though your form probably looks like someone trying to start a particularly stubborn lawnmower. Joke 1. The Romans believed exercise was essential for health, which is admirable, except they thought the best exercise was covering yourself in oil and then wrestling someone in the dirt. Modern gym memberships suddenly seem more reasonable. After working up a proper sweat, you make your way to the tepidarium, the warm room. This is where the real bathing begins, though the concept of bathing here would confuse anyone with a modern shower. There's no soap, for one thing. Romans haven't invented it yet. Or rather, they know soap exists, but consider it a barbaric German thing used for dyeing hair. Instead, you cover yourself in olive oil. An attendant offers to help, but you decline. You've brought your own strigil, a curved bronze scraper that looks like it could double as a weapon in an emergency. You pour oil over your arms, your chest, your legs, working it into your skin until you're glistening like a piece of furniture being polished. The oil, mixed with your sweat and the dust from the palestra, forms a paste that allegedly contains all the dirt and impurities from your skin. Now comes the fun part, scraping it all off. You run the strigil down your arm, and a ribbon of oily gunk collects in the curve of the blade. You wipe it onto the floor, where it joins similar contributions from hundreds of other bathers. Somewhere, a slave with a bucket and a resigned expression will eventually clean this up. The Romans have not yet invented the concept of feeling guilty about this arrangement. The tepidarium is warm, but not hot, heated by the same system that warms the other rooms. Under your feet, beneath the marble tiles, is a space called the hypocaust. This is where the magic happens, or rather, where enslaved people feed wood into furnaces that heat air and send it flowing through channels under the floors and behind the walls. The Romans are very proud of this system. They should be. It won't be matched in Europe for over 1,000 years. You spend time in the tepidarium, letting your pores open, letting the warmth seep into muscles that have spent too long hunched over work. Around you, conversations flow like the warm air. A merchant complains about shipping costs. Two women debate the merits of different oil vendors. An old man delivers a lengthy opinion about how baths used to be better in his day, somehow managing to make luxury sound like hardship. The caldarium beckons with its promise of heat that borders on excessive. You enter and immediately feel sweat beating on your skin. The room is large, domed, with windows that create shafts of light through the steam. The hot pool dominates the center, its water maintained at a temperature that ancient physicians insist is healthful despite the way it makes your heart race and your vision swim slightly.
You ease into the pool, grateful that it's deep enough to sit with water up to your chest. The heat is immediate and total. Your skin flushes red, your breathing shallows. Around you, other bathers are in various states of heat tolerance. Some look comfortable, even bored. Others look like they're enduring a trial, which isn't entirely inaccurate. The Romans value tolerance for discomfort, viewing it as a form of strength. The conversations in the caldarium are different from those in the cooler rooms. The heat makes people languid, slows their speech, softens their edges. A man floats nearby, his eyes closed, his face peaceful. Another sits on the pool's edge, his legs dangling in the water, conducting a desultory conversation with a friend about someone's daughter and someone else's son, and a proposed marriage that may or may not happen depending on dowry negotiations. You stay in the hot pool longer than you probably should, until your fingers are wrinkled and your head feels light. The Romans believe this is beneficial, that sweating in hot water purges toxins and balances humors. Modern medicine would suggest you're primarily just getting dehydrated, but the sensation is undeniably pleasant, a kind of voluntary fever that leaves you feeling purged and clean. When you finally climb out, your legs are unsteady for a moment. You sit on a bench near the edge, letting your heart rate slow, feeling the air cool your skin. A slave offers you a cup of water, which you accept gratefully. The water is cool, but not cold, brought from the aqueducts, but allowed to sit until it reaches a temperature that won't shock your heated system. The frigidarium is next, though you'd take your time reaching it. The path from caldarium to frigidarium is a journey through temperature zones, each room slightly cooler than the last. This is intentional, designed to prevent the kind of shock that could stop a heart. The Romans have learned through experience that while contrasting temperatures are healthful, extremes need to be approached with caution. The frigidarium's pool looks uninviting. Its water so clear you can see the blue tiles at the bottom, the kind of clarity that comes from water that's genuinely cold. You don't hesitate, because hesitation makes it worse. You jump in, and the cold erases every thought in your head except for the immediate, urgent desire to get back out. But you don't get out. You stay, breathing through the cold, feeling your body adjust in stages. First, the surface of your skin goes numb. Then, underneath, a deeper warmth begins to build, your body generating heat to combat the cold. After a minute, maybe two, the cold becomes less of an assault and more of a sensation, sharp and clean, and strangely exhilarating. Other bathers are in the pool with you, some gasping, some laughing, all sharing this peculiar moment of voluntary discomfort. There's a camaraderie in the frigidarium, a sense that you're all in this together, all choosing to shock your systems for the sake of health and the peculiar pleasure that comes after the cold. You emerge from the pool feeling alive in a way that's hard to describe. Your skin tingles, your blood feels like it's moving faster, your thoughts are sharp and clear. The frigidarium's effects are temporary, but while they last, you feel capable of anything. This is why Romans love the baths, you think. Not just for the cleaning or the socializing, but for this sensation of being fully present in your body, fully aware of being alive. The rest of your bath follows a leisurely pattern. You wander through the various rooms, spending time wherever feels right. You get a second scraping in the tepidarium, paying a bath attendant to reach the places you couldn't manage yourself. The attendant is efficient, professional, his strigil moving in practiced strokes that remove oil and dead skin with mechanical precision. You visit the laconicum, the dry sweating room, which is even hotter than the caldarium, but without the humidity. The heat here is savage, uncompromising, the kind that makes breathing feel like a conscious effort. You don't stay long. Even Romans have limits, and you're not interested in finding yours today. The baths have massage facilities, and you consider getting one, but the price today seems steep for your budget. Instead, you settle for stretching in a quiet corner of the tepidarium, working through the series of movements that a trainer once taught you. The stretches are simple, but effective, pulling muscles that have spent the day contracted, creating space in joints that have spent the morning hammering bronze. As you stretch, you watch the social dynamics of the baths play out around you. The wealthy arrive with entourages of slaves who carry their bathing supplies in expensive containers. The middle classes, like yourself, arrive alone or with a single slave. The poor arrived with nothing but themselves, relying on the public oil and the most basic services. But once everyone is naked and sweaty, the distinctions blur. Yes, the wealthy get better massages and fancier strigils, but they're also breathing the same steam, sitting in the same pools, subject to the same heat. The baths are one of the few places in Rome where social hierarchy loosens slightly, where a senator might find himself discussing politics with a shopkeeper because they're both sitting in the same warm pool. Joke 7. Roman baths were revolutionary equalizers, proving that when everyone is naked and sweaty, social class matters less than whether you can handle the frigidarium without making embarrassing noises. You spend time in the library again, drawn by curiosity to see what books are available today. The selection changes as people borrow scrolls and return them, as new acquisitions arrive from bookshops or private collections. Today there's a history of the Punic Wars, a collection of poetry, and several philosophical texts on subjects ranging from ethics to physics. You unroll the poetry collection and read a few verses. The poet describes love in terms that are simultaneously explicit and euphemistic, a talent that Roman poets have perfected. The words paint pictures of gardens and bodies, of desires that are natural, and celebrations of beauty that verge on worship. You read until the light through the window shifts, marking the passage of time you weren't tracking.
The gardens outside are pleasant in the late afternoon.
The sun has lost its harsh midday intensity, casting longer shadows that create patterns on the paths. You walk along a colonnade, admiring the statues placed at regular intervals. Gods, heroes, emperors, athletes, all frozen in marble perfection. Some of the statues are copies of Greek originals, Rome's tribute to the culture it conquered and then adopted as its own artistic standard. A fountain splashes nearby, and you sit on its edge, trailing your fingers in the water. The water is cool, constantly refreshed from the aqueducts. Fish swim in the fountain's pool, small silver things that dart between the legs of marble nymphs. Keeping fish in fountains serves a practical purpose, controlling mosquitoes and other pests, but it also adds life to the space, movement to complement the static beauty of the stone. You are not alone in the garden. Other bathers wander the paths, some in conversation, others solitary like yourself. A group of young men are debating something with the intensity that young men bring to every topic they consider important. An older woman sits on a bench, reading from a small scroll, while a slave stands nearby, ready to assist if needed. A couple walks together, maintaining the appropriate distance that public propriety requires, but leaning toward each other in ways that suggest they'd prefer less distance. The garden is one of the bath's secrets, you think. Everyone knows about the heated pools and the exercise yards, but the gardens offer something quieter, a space for reflection between the more active elements of bathing. The Romans understand the value of variety, of spaces that serve different moods and needs. As evening approaches, the baths begin to shift their character again. The afternoon crowd is thinning, heading home for dinner or to evening entertainments. Soon the women's hours will begin, and the whole complex will transform. Same spaces, but different energy. You've stayed longer than you intended, the hours slipping away in the pleasant routine of hot, cold, warm, rest, repeat. You make one final circuit of the bathing rooms, a last visit to the tepidarium to warm yourself before facing the evening air, a quick splash in a cool pool to rinse away the final traces of oil. You dry yourself with the inadequate linen towel, dress in the changing room, and step out into a Rome that's preparing for evening. The streets are busy with dinner traffic. Food vendors are setting up for the evening trade, grilling meat and vegetables that fill the air with smoke and savory scents. Taverns are opening their doors, and the sound of conversation and laughter spills into the streets. You feel the contrast between the bath's orderly calm and the street's cheerful chaos. You stop at a tavern for dinner, too relaxed to cook for yourself. The meal is simple: grilled fish, bread, olives, and wine that's better than the midday stuff, but still nothing special. You eat at a counter, standing shoulder to shoulder with other diners, everyone focused on their food and their own thoughts. The walk home takes you through neighborhoods that are settling into evening rhythms. Families are visible through open doors, gathered for dinner, their conversations mixing with the street noise. Temples are closing, priests extinguishing altar fires and securing valuables. Shopkeepers are pulling closed their shutters, ending the business day. Your own home welcomes you with its familiar smells and shadows. You light lamps, bank the fire in the small brazier that heats water and cooks food. Your body feels tired in the best way, muscles that have been worked and heated and cooled, now ready for rest. You lie down on your bed, pulling a blanket over yourself despite the warm evening, and feel sleep approaching. Your last conscious thoughts are of the baths, of the marble columns and the warm pools, of the conversations overheard and the moments of solitary peace. Tomorrow you will wake and work and return to the baths again, the cycle repeating like water flowing through aqueducts, constant and reliable and somehow essential to what it means to be Roman. The social fabric of bathing. The morning arrives with the usual urban symphony of carts, roosters, and distant arguments.
You wake thinking about the baths again, but today your thoughts focus less on the physical experience and more on the social world that exists within those marble walls. The baths are Rome in miniature, all of society gathered in one place, and understanding the baths means understanding how Romans relate to each other. Your workday begins with a commission that requires visiting a customer, a minor official who works in the grain administration. His house is modest by wealthy standards, but palatial by yours, with a private courtyard and multiple rooms arranged around it. The official himself is cordial, offering you watered wine while discussing the specifications for a set of matched strigils he wants to give as gifts to his clients. The conversation turns, as conversations often do, to the baths. The official expresses satisfaction with the Baths of Trajan, which he visits most afternoons. He describes the facility's layout with the enthusiasm of someone discussing a friend, praising the caldarium's temperature and criticizing the recent crowds in the palestra. You nod along, contributing your own observations about Caracalla's baths, comparing notes on water temperature and oil quality, like scholars debating fine points of philosophy. This is how Romans talk, you realize. The baths provide a common reference point, a shared experience that crosses social boundaries. You and this official have little in common economically or politically, but you've both stood in warm pools and been scraped with bronze tools, and that creates a kind of understanding. You arrange the commission and return to your workshop and think about the social architecture of the baths. The building itself encourages interaction through its design. The paths through the rooms create natural meeting points. The pools require sharing space. The exercise areas demand witnesses and participants. You can't bathe alone in a Roman bath, not really, even if you wanted to.
There are the businessmen who use the baths as an extension of their offices. You've overheard countless negotiations conducted in warm pools, deals struck between scraping and soaking. The baths offer a neutral territory for business, a place where the trappings of wealth and status are literally stripped away, leaving just men and their words. The afternoon arrives, and you make your way to the baths earlier than usual, curious to observe the social dynamics more deliberately. You pay attention to the entrance, watching how people arrive. Some come alone, but many come in groups, friends meeting friends, fathers bringing sons, masters accompanied by slaves who will either serve or bathe separately depending on the master's generosity and the establishment's rules. The changing room is where social identity begins to dissolve. Clothing marks status in Rome with a precision that would satisfy a mathematician. The quality of fabric, the style of draping, the presence or absence of purple trim, all these communicate rank and wealth. But in the changing room, everyone strips to the same uniform: skin. The senator's body might be softer, the laborer's more scarred, but naked flesh has a way of equalizing that clothed bodies don't. You watch a wealthy merchant store his expensive tunic in a niche, paying a slave extra to guard not just his clothes, but also his dignity, ensuring no one steals the visible markers of his success. Nearby, a working man simply stuffs his single threadbare garment into an empty space and hopes for the best. Both men will enter the baths as Romans, but the merchant carries his status internally now, in his confidence and his expectations of service. The palestra is where age and athleticism create different hierarchies than wealth. Here the young and fit dominate, their bodies capable of the exercises that older or less athletic men attempt with varying degrees of success. You watch a teenager wrestle with his tutor, the boy's technique rough but his enthusiasm boundless. Nearby, a middle-aged man huffs through weight exercises, his face red with effort and determination. Joke 8. The palestra proved that no amount of money could buy athletic ability, though it could buy a trainer who'd pretend not to notice when you counted lifting the weight once as 3 repetitions for training purposes.
The social mixing in the palaestra creates interesting moments. A slave who works as a trainer has authority here that he lacks everywhere else in society. Free men, even wealthy ones, defer to his expertise, following his instructions and accepting his corrections. The slave wears his knowledge like armor, moving through the exercise area with confidence that would be dangerous anywhere outside these walls. You strike up a conversation with a fuller, who's resting between exercises. He's a free man, but poor. His trade profitable enough for survival, but not prosperity. He tells you about his work, about the process of cleaning and treating fabrics, and you tell him about bronze working. The conversation is easy. Two craftsmen comparing notes on their respective trades, finding common ground in the challenges of working with difficult materials. The fuller mentions that he comes to the baths daily, considering it essential for his well-being. His work is physically demanding and chemically harsh, and the baths offer relief from both. He describes the process of washing in the same hot pools where wealthy Romans soak, and there's satisfaction in his voice, a sense that the baths represent a form of justice, a brief equality in a world that otherwise makes clear distinctions. As you move to the bathing rooms, you become more aware of the slave workers who make the baths function. They're everywhere once you start looking. Cleaning floors, maintaining equipment, stoking furnaces, assisting bathers. Some are skilled professionals, like the trainers and masseurs. Others are simply labor, bodies purchased to do the work that free Romans prefer not to do.
The relationship between free bathers and enslaved workers is complex. In the changing room, a wealthy man might ignore the slave guarding his clothes, treating him as furniture. But in the massage area, that same man will lie down and allow a slave's hands to manipulate his body, trusting the slave's skill and experience. The bath slaves occupy a strange space, simultaneously invisible and essential, their labor creating the leisure that everyone else enjoys. You observe a massage in progress, watching how the slave masseur works. His hands move with practiced efficiency, finding knots and releasing them, reading the body beneath his hands like a text. The customer is a senator, identifiable by the residual tan lines where his toga stripes usually sit. The senator talks while being massaged, conducting business with another man who sits nearby, as if the slave doesn't exist, or at least doesn't matter enough to warrant silence. The masseur's face is neutral, professional. You wonder what he thinks, whether he listens to the business being conducted, whether he cares about the political machinations being discussed in his presence. Slaves hear everything in the baths, but they're expected to remember nothing, or at least to pretend they remember nothing. Information is power. Even, especially, information acquired while rubbing oil into someone's back. The tepidarium is where you witness the most complex social interactions. The warm room's temperature encourages lingering, and Romans use this time to conduct various forms of business. You see clients greeting patrons, the morning ritual of salutatio, transported to afternoon and moved indoors. The clients bow slightly, express gratitude for past favors, hint at future needs. The patrons acknowledge them with varying degrees of warmth, distributing attention like a finite resource. The patron-client relationship is fundamental to Roman society, and the baths are where these relationships are maintained and displayed. A wealthy patron might arrive with a crowd of clients, their number and quality indicating his importance. The clients benefit from association with wealth and power, receiving gifts, legal help, or business opportunities in exchange for loyalty and public support.
You watch one such interaction unfold. The patron is a senator, his body softened by years of good living. His clients are a mixed group, a struggling merchant, a young lawyer, a retired soldier. They gather around him in the tepidarium, and he holds court, dispensing advice and promises with the magnanimity of someone who can afford to be generous. The merchant asks about a contract that's been delayed. The senator promises to speak to someone. The lawyer seeks advice on a case. The senator offers a legal opinion with casual authority. The soldier requests help with his son's career. The senator knows someone who knows someone. The clients thank him. Their gratitude effusive, but also pragmatic. This is business, relationship maintenance, the lubrication that keeps Roman society functioning. Joke 9. Roman patronage was like a social pyramid scheme, where instead of selling essential oils, you sold access and influence, except it was legal and everyone agreed it was a perfectly reasonable way to organize a civilization. You move to the caldarium and observe different social dynamics. The heat makes people vulnerable, strips away some of the performative aspects of social interaction. Conversations in the hot pool are often more honest, more direct. Perhaps it's the physical discomfort that makes emotional discomfort seem less daunting. Perhaps it's simply that everyone is too hot to maintain elaborate pretenses. Two men are arguing about politics, their disagreement vigorous but not hostile. One supports the current emperor's policies, the other criticizes them. They debate back and forth, voices rising occasionally, then falling back to conversational levels. Other bathers listen or ignore them as preference dictates. Political discussion is common in the baths, safer here than in some public forums, contained within walls where the emperor's informants are either absent or outnumbered. The baths' political culture is complicated. On one hand, the baths are public spaces where speech is relatively free. On the other, they're also places where reputations can be made or destroyed, where the wrong word to the wrong person can have consequences. You've heard stories of men who lost business opportunities or political positions because of something they said in the baths, a careless word overheard and reported. You settle into a corner of the caldarium and simply watch. The hot pool contains a cross-section of Rome. Old men with wrinkled skin and faded scars from long-ago military service. Young men with smooth skin and uncertain expressions, new to the baths or to Rome itself. Middle-aged men in the prime of life, their bodies showing the effects of both prosperity and age. A few boys on the cusp of manhood, accompanying fathers or older relatives, learning the social choreography of bathing. The conversations overlap, creating a soundscape that's distinctly Roman. Latin mixed with Greek, the educated second language that marks someone as cultured. Technical discussions of law and business, gossip about mutual acquaintances, complaints about everything from grain prices to traffic congestion. The baths are where Romans process their world, verbally sorting through the complexity of city life.
You notice how physical space in the pools correlates with social relationships. Friends cluster together, their bodies close in ways that would be inappropriate elsewhere. Business associates maintain distance while conducting their negotiations. Strangers respect invisible boundaries, allowing each other space even in crowded pools. The unspoken rules of Roman social interaction continue to operate even when everyone is naked and wet. The frigidarium offers different social moments. The cold pool's shock creates instant camaraderie among those who brave it. Strangers commiserate, sharing the experience of voluntary discomfort. Laughter comes easier in the frigidarium, perhaps because the cold strips away dignity along with warmth, creating a kind of leveling effect. You jump in alongside a merchant and a student, three people from different worlds united temporarily by cold water and questionable life choices. After the plunge, you wander toward the libraries and lecture halls, curious about the educational aspects of bath culture. A small crowd has gathered in one of the lecture spaces where a philosopher is speaking about Stoic ethics. The lecturer is good, engaging without being theatrical, making complex ideas accessible without dumbing them down. You listen for a while, standing at the back of the crowd.
The philosopher discusses the importance of virtue over pleasure, the need to control passion with reason. There's irony in delivering this lecture in a building dedicated to bodily pleasure, but Romans seem unbothered by such contradictions. Philosophy and pleasure coexist here, different aspects of a life well lived. The audience is mixed, ranging from serious students taking notes on wax tablets to casual listeners who wander in and out as interest dictates. A young man near you asks a question, and the philosopher engages with it seriously, treating the question as worthy of consideration regardless of the questioner's age or status. This is part of the Baths' educational function, creating spaces where learning can happen informally, without the rigid structures of traditional schooling. You move on to the library, where a different kind of social interaction occurs. Here, readers maintain silence or near silence, respecting the concentration of others. The library's attendants are slaves, but educated ones, capable of helping visitors find texts and sometimes even discussing the contents. You watch one such interaction. A young aristocrat seeking a specific text on astronomy, the slave attendant navigating the scroll collection with the confidence of someone who knows exactly where everything is stored. The social world of the Baths extends beyond the building itself. As you exit in the evening, you notice groups making plans for later. Friends arrange to meet at taverns. Business associates schedule morning meetings. A patron invites his clients to his home for dinner, the invitation extended casually but carrying weight. The Baths are a social hub, connecting people to the broader networks that structure Roman life. Walking home, you reflect on what you've observed. The Baths are many things: a place to clean, exercise, and relax. But they're also a social institution, perhaps the most important one in Rome, outside the family. The Baths are where Romans learn how to be Roman, where social norms are transmitted and reinforced, where the complex hierarchies of Roman society are both maintained and occasionally challenged.
You think about the people you encountered today, the senator and his clients, the rich merchant and the poor fuller, the slave masseur and his free customer, the philosopher and his students. All of them came together in the same physical space, subjected to the same heat and cold, pursuing the same goals of cleanliness and leisure. The differences between them didn't disappear, but for a few hours they mattered less. This, you realize, is the genius of the Baths. They create a space where Rome can be both hierarchical and equal, where social distinctions are maintained but softened, where people from different worlds can interact on terms that are, if not quite equal, at least more balanced than anywhere else in the city. The Baths are democracy's cousin, republicanism practiced in warm water, a daily reminder that Romans share something fundamental, regardless of their wealth or status. Your sleep that night is peaceful, your dreams filled with warm water and echoing voices, the sounds of Rome talking to itself in marble halls. Tomorrow you'll return to work, to the hierarchies and divisions that structure daily life. But tonight you carry with you the memory of the Baths, of a place where being Roman means something more than social class or wealth, where citizenship is performed through shared rituals of cleaning and leisure, where the water flows equally for everyone, even if everything else doesn't. The morning brings a headache, the kind that settles behind your eyes and suggests last night's wine was cheaper than you thought. You lie in bed for a moment, contemplating your options. You could suffer through it, or you could do what Romans do, go to the Baths. The Baths are many things, but high on the list is their reputation as a cure for countless ailments, real and imagined, physical and spiritual. Your work today is light, a morning of inventory and organization rather than active production. You catalog your bronze stock, count your tools, sweep the workshop floor. Your partners are both absent, the oil lamp maker visiting suppliers and the mirror maker claiming illness, though his version of illness seems to coincide suspiciously with good weather and the opening of a new tavern near the Forum. By midday, your headache has neither improved nor worsened, and you decide the Baths are indeed the answer.
Romans have strong opinions about the medicinal properties of bathing, opinions supported by everything from personal experience to medical texts to complete nonsense. The line between these categories is often unclear, but the conviction is total. You arrive at the baths and immediately feel better, though whether this is the baths effect or simply the relief of being somewhere you want to be is debatable. The atmosphere today feels different, more purposeful. You notice more older bathers, people clearly visiting for health reasons rather than social ones. A man with a pronounced limp makes his way carefully toward the warm pools. An elderly woman is helped by 2 slaves, her movements slow and deliberate. The baths have always had a therapeutic reputation. Roman physicians recommend bathing for a staggering array of conditions: rheumatism, digestive complaints, skin conditions, respiratory problems, anxiety, depression, and general malaise all supposedly respond to the right combination of hot water, cold water, and scraping. Modern medicine might raise eyebrows at some of these claims, but others turn out to have basis in fact. You start your bathing routine, but pay more attention to the health-related aspects. In the palestra, you notice that exercise is prescribed as medicine. A trainer is working with an older man, guiding him through gentle movements designed to maintain flexibility and strength. The exercises are careful, calibrated to the man's abilities, nothing like the vigorous wrestling and weightlifting happening elsewhere in the space. The trainer sees you watching and approaches after finishing with his client. You ask about his work, and he's happy to explain. He describes himself as a medical gymnast, trained not just in athletics, but in therapeutic exercise. He works with people recovering from injuries, managing chronic conditions, or simply fighting the effects of age. The exercises he prescribes are based on medical theory, on ideas about how bodies work and what they need to maintain health. Joke 10. Roman trainers were basically physical therapists who charged less and talked more about humors, proving that the healing profession has always involved making people do exercises they don't want to do while explaining why it's good for them in language they don't quite understand. The trainer explains his philosophy. The body, he says, is meant to move. Lack of movement causes stagnation, which leads to disease. But movement must be appropriate to the individual's condition and capabilities. Too much exercise can harm. Too little allows the body to weaken. The art is finding the balance, prescribing the right amount and type of movement for each person. This is more sophisticated than you expected. You've always thought of exercise as something athletes do, not as medicine. But the trainer describes cases where movement has helped people recover from illness or manage conditions that would otherwise be debilitating. He talks about a man with joint pain who found relief through daily swimming in the warm pools, a woman with breathing difficulties who improved through controlled exercise in the open air, a young man recovering from a broken leg who regained strength through carefully progressive weight training. You move to the bathing rooms with new appreciation for their therapeutic potential. In the tepidarium, you overhear a conversation between 2 men about their health regimens. One swears by daily hot baths for his back pain. The other prefers alternating hot and cold, claiming it improves his circulation and mental clarity. They debate the merits of different approaches with the seriousness of people discussing military strategy. The warm room does help your headache, you notice. The heat relaxes tension in your neck and shoulders, tension you weren't aware you were carrying. The warm air seems to open something in your head, creating space where before there was only pressure. You sit on a bench and focus on breathing deeply, letting the warmth work its way through your system.
A bath attendant approaches and asks if you'd like a massage. You agree, willing to try anything that might help. The attendant leads you to a space where several massage tables are set up. Simple wooden frames with leather straps for support. You lie face down, and the attendant begins working on your back. The massage is vigorous, nothing gentle about it. The attendant uses oil to smooth his movements, but his hands press deep into muscle, seeking out knots and attacking them with determination. You wince, trying not to make undignified noises, but the attendant seems unconcerned about your comfort. He's focused on the work, on forcing your muscles to release their tension, whether they want to or not.
As he works, the attendant explains what he's doing. This muscle is too tight, pulling on that one. This knot is affecting your posture, creating strain in your neck. He describes the body as a system of interconnected parts, where problems in one area create problems elsewhere. His hands find the source of your headache in the muscles at the base of your skull, tension that's been building for days without your awareness. The massage hurts, but afterward, your headache is gone, completely gone, vanished like it was never there. You sit up, roll your shoulders, and feel the difference immediately. The attendant nods with satisfaction, offers suggestions for stretches you can do to prevent the tension from returning, and moves on to his next client. You're amazed and slightly disturbed by how effective the treatment was. You make your way to the caldarium, thinking about the therapeutic aspects of heat. Romans believe hot water is especially beneficial, opening pores, improving circulation, drawing out toxins. Modern medicine has different explanations for heat's effects, but the end result is similar. Heat does increase blood flow, does relax muscles, does create physiological changes that can be beneficial. In the hot pool, you find yourself next to a man who's clearly irregular. His skin has the permanent flush of someone who spends hours daily in hot water. He's elderly, his body frail, but he moves through the water with the ease of long practice. You ask if he comes for his health, and he launches into a detailed explanation. He has arthritis, he says, painful inflammation in his joints that makes movement difficult. But the hot water helps. The heat eases the pain, allows him to move more freely. He comes every afternoon, spends an hour in the caldarium, and claims it's the only thing that makes his condition bearable. His physicians have tried various treatments, but nothing works as well as the baths. This is a common story, you learn. The baths are full of people managing chronic conditions, using the heat, cold, and exercise as medicine. The baths are cheaper than most medical treatments and more pleasant than most remedies. They're accessible, requiring no special knowledge or expensive ingredients. And they work, or at least they work often enough to maintain their reputation. You observe other therapeutic practices happening around you. In the corner of the tepidarium, a man is being cupped, the traditional treatment of placing heated cups on the skin to create suction. The cups leave circular bruises, but supposedly draw out bad humors and improve health. The man seems content with the treatment, chatting with the practitioner while his back blooms with purple circles. Nearby, someone is receiving what looks like a poultice applied to their chest. You ask an attendant what it is, and he explains it's a treatment for respiratory congestion, a mixture of herbs and oils applied hot to help loosen phlegm and ease breathing. The smell is powerful, medicinal, herbs you recognize and others you don't. The patient breathes deeply, clearly struggling, but hopeful the treatment will help. The baths attract medical practitioners of various sorts. Some are legitimate physicians, trained in Greek medical traditions, familiar with the works of Hippocrates and Galen. Others are less reputable, offering treatments based more on tradition or desperation than medical theory. The baths don't discriminate, allowing anyone to offer services as long as they pay for the privilege and don't cause obvious harm. You wander toward a corner where a physician has set up a temporary consultation space. He's seeing patients, offering diagnoses and prescriptions, all while surrounded by the steam and noise of the baths. This seems odd, but the physician explains that many of his patients are people who come to the baths for health reasons, making this an efficient location for his practice. He describes his approach to diagnosis. He looks at the patient's color, their tongue, their eyes. He asks about symptoms, bowel movements, sleep patterns, diet. He might check pulse or examine urine. His diagnostic tools are basic by modern standards, but sophisticated by Roman ones. He's trained to recognize patterns, to connect symptoms with conditions, to prescribe treatments based on medical theory. For your headache, he says, he would have prescribed exactly what you did: heat, massage, and rest. But he adds recommendations for prevention. Make sure you're drinking enough water, especially in this heat. Avoid cheap wine or water it more heavily. Get regular exercise and sleep. Manage stress through either philosophy or distraction, preferably both. His advice is simple, practical, and mostly sensible. Joke 11.
Roman physicians were remarkably practical, prescribing baths, exercise, and decent wine, before resorting to bloodletting, which suggests they understood that sometimes the best medicine is just basic self-care combined with not doing actively harmful things. The physician talks about the theory of humors, the medical understanding that dominates Roman thought. The body contains 4 humors, he explains: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Health requires these humors to be in balance. Disease results from imbalance. Treatment aims to restore balance through diet, exercise, rest, and sometimes more aggressive interventions like bloodletting or purging. The baths fit into humoral theory perfectly. Heat increases blood flow, working on the hot and moist humor. Cold water affects phlegm, the cold and moist humor. Exercise generates yellow bile, hot and dry. The whole bathing routine is essentially humoral therapy, adjusting the body's internal balance through external means.
You find this fascinating, even though you're not entirely convinced. The theory seems tidy, perhaps too tidy for something as complicated as human health. But Romans believe it, and their beliefs shape their behavior. People come to the baths not just because bathing feels good, but because they think it's actively making them healthier, rebalancing humors that daily life throws out of alignment. The frigidarium takes on new meaning when you think of it medically. The cold plunge isn't just for invigoration or showing off your tolerance. It's therapeutic, a way to affect the body's humoral balance. You watch people enter the cold pool and think about what they believe is happening inside their bodies. Blood vessels contracting, phlegm being managed, excess heat being drawn off. Whether the theory is right or wrong, the physiological effects are real. You spend time in the gardens, drawn by their reputation for promoting health. Romans believe fresh air is vital for well-being, and the gardens provide air that's fresher than the city streets, filtered by plants and cooled by fountains. You sit on a bench under a tree and simply breathe, consciously drawing air into your lungs and releasing it, a practice some physicians recommend for respiratory health. The gardens are also where people come to walk, to move without the intensity of the palestra. Walking is prescribed for digestion, for circulation, for mental health. You watch an elderly couple make slow circuits of the paths, their pace measured, their conversation quiet. They're here for their health, walking as medicine, maintaining mobility and connection simultaneously. A young mother sits near you, nursing an infant while her older child plays nearby. She's come to the baths during the women's hours, which are ending soon. You're reminded that the baths serve women's health needs too, though you know less about that side of bath culture. Women have their own health concerns, their own therapeutic uses for the baths, their own relationships with physicians and medical theory. You think about childbirth, about how dangerous it is in Rome, how many women and infants die in the process. The baths can't prevent those deaths, but they might help women recover afterward, might provide gentle exercise and social support during pregnancy. You've overheard conversations about women's health in the baths, always brief and euphemistic, but enough to know that women use these spaces therapeutically just as men do. Mental health is another dimension of the bath's therapeutic function. Romans recognize that the mind can be sick just as the body can, though they don't always distinguish clearly between the two. Melancholy, anxiety, what they call acedia or spiritual torpor, all these respond to bathing, Romans believe. The warmth soothes, the routine provides structure, the social interaction combats isolation. You observe a man who seems deeply melancholic, sitting alone in the tepidarium, staring at nothing. A friend approaches and sits beside him, not speaking at first, just being present. After a while they begin to talk, voices too low for you to hear. The friend has brought the melancholic man to the baths, recognizing that isolation makes the condition worse. The baths force engagement with the world, make it harder to withdraw completely. This is informal therapy, community care happening in warm rooms. No physician has prescribed it, but everyone knows that connection helps, that warmth helps, that having a reason to leave the house and be among people helps. The baths provide all these things, making them as much mental health intervention as physical cleaning. You make your way back to the heated rooms, feeling your body's response to the temperature changes. The transitions between hot and cold, dry and humid create distinct physiological states. Your heart rate increases in the heat, slows in the cold. Your skin flushes and pales, contracts and relaxes. Your breathing deepens and shallows. The baths are a workout for your cardiovascular system, a stress test administered through temperature rather than exercise. In the laconicum, the dry sweating room, you meet a man who comes specifically for skin conditions. He has psoriasis, he explains, patches of irritated skin that crack and bleed if not managed. The dry heat helps, he claims, better than any ointment or poultice. He combines the dry heat with time in the humid caldarium, the contrast somehow easing his symptoms. His skin looks better than many people's, suggesting his regimen works, at least for him. This is the challenge with Roman medicine, you think. It's personal, empirical, based on individual experience more than systematic study. What works for one person might not work for another. Physicians offer theories to explain these differences, talking about individual humoral balances or constitution, but the practical reality is trial and error. The baths work for many conditions, but which conditions and for whom remains somewhat mysterious. You encounter a group of military veterans, identifiable by their scars and the way they move, bodies marked by service. They're using the baths therapeutically, managing old injuries and the chronic pain that comes from years of marching, fighting, and sleeping on hard ground. They have their own routines, developed through experience, combining exercise with heat therapy in ways that help them maintain function. One veteran describes his routine in detail. He starts with gentle exercise to warm up, then the apodyterium to relax muscles, the caldarium for heat penetration into deep tissues, a massage focusing on old injury sites, the frigidarium briefly, just enough to reduce inflammation, then more apodyterium to rewarm gradually. His routine is elaborate, but it's the result of years of figuring out what helps and what doesn't. The baths are essentially a veterans' hospital, you think, an informal rehabilitation facility where old soldiers come to manage the legacy of their service. No one has officially designated it as such, but the function emerges naturally from the combination of therapeutic resources and the population's needs. The empire breaks bodies in war, then provides baths to partially repair them. It's not enough, but it's something. Joke 12. The Roman military's healthcare plan was basically survive the war, and then we'll give you free access to hot water forever, which was admittedly better than nothing, but probably not what soldiers were hoping for when they signed up.
As evening approaches, you find yourself in the library again, drawn to a medical text someone has left on a reading table. The scroll discusses diseases, their causes, and their treatments. You read about fevers, about the importance of identifying whether a fever is continuous or intermittent, acute or chronic. You read about dietary recommendations for various conditions, about which foods increase which humors. The text is sophisticated in some ways, crude in others. It recognizes that different diseases require different treatments, that observation and careful diagnosis matter. But it also includes recommendations that seem bizarre, drinking wine mixed with crushed gemstones for certain conditions, or applying spiderwebs to wounds to stop bleeding, which actually works, but for reasons the Romans don't understand. You realize that Roman medicine is a mixture of genuine insight and complete misconception, effective treatments and useless or harmful ones, all blended together in a system that's internally consistent even when externally questionable. The baths represent the best of Roman therapeutic practice, non-invasive, generally beneficial, based on observation of what helps people feel better. The sun is setting as you leave the baths, your body tired, but your headache long gone. You feel better than you did this morning, looser and more relaxed, the tension that causes headaches temporarily erased. Tomorrow it might return, but tonight you're free of it, and that's worth the afternoon spent in marble halls. Walking home, you think about the relationship between health and cleanliness in Roman thought. They're deeply connected, but not identical. Cleanliness prevents disease, Romans believe, by removing corrupt matter from the body's surface. But health requires more than cleanliness. It requires balance, proper diet, appropriate exercise, adequate rest,
and regular bathing to maintain that balance. The baths are preventative medicine, a daily practice designed to keep people healthy rather than just treating them when they're sick. This is actually quite sophisticated, this idea that health maintenance matters, that you don't wait until you're ill to take care of your body. Modern medicine would recognize this as wellness rather than treatment, prevention rather than cure. Your sleep that night is deep and restorative, the kind of sleep that comes when your body is truly relaxed. You dream of warm water and healing, of muscles unknotting and pain fading, of the endless cycle of hot and cold that Romans believe keeps the body in balance. The dreams are peaceful, therapeutic themselves, your mind processing the day's experiences in warm pools and quiet gardens. Tomorrow you'll wake refreshed, your headache still gone, your body reminded of what it feels like to be well. You'll return to work and eventually to the baths again, maintaining the routine that keeps you functional in a city that offers countless ways to become dysfunctional. The baths aren't magic, but they're close enough. A technology for health that works even when the theory behind it is questionable. Entertainment, luxury, and commerce. The morning brings news of games at the Colosseum, wild animal hunts followed by gladiatorial combat. The city buzzes with anticipation, but you're more interested in a different kind of entertainment, the slower, subtler pleasures available at the baths. Romans love spectacle, but they also appreciate sophistication, and the baths offer both in carefully calibrated doses. Your work today involves a large commission, a set of decorated strigils for a wealthy family planning to host guests from the provinces. The strigils need to be impressive, proof of Roman refinement and wealth. You spend the morning on decorative work, incising patterns into bronze handles, creating designs that suggest waves, olive branches, geometric patterns that please the eye. As you work, you think about luxury and its role in Roman life. The empire has made Romans rich, or at least made some Romans very rich, and that wealth needs expression. The baths are one venue for that expression, places where luxury can both be displayed and enjoyed. The strigils you're making are tools, yes, but they're also status symbols, markers of wealth that will be noticed and envied. The afternoon finds you at the baths earlier than usual, curious to observe the entertainment aspects more closely. Today there's a special performance scheduled, a poetry reading in one of the halls. Romans love poetry, treating it as both entertainment and education, a way to experience beauty while demonstrating cultural refinement. The reading room is filling up when you arrive. A raised platform has been set up at one end, with benches arranged in a semicircle facing it. The audience is mixed, ranging from young students to elderly connoisseurs, wealthy patrons to ordinary citizens seeking free entertainment. The baths democratize access to culture just as they democratize access to cleanliness. The poet arrives, a middle-aged man in an expensive toga, clearly someone of status and education. He acknowledges the audience with a nod, no elaborate introduction needed. People know who he is, or at least pretend to know, because admitting ignorance about a famous poet would mark you as uncultured. He begins to read, his voice trained to project without shouting, filling the space with carefully modulated sound. The poetry is about love, that most reliable of Roman subjects. The poet describes a lover's beauty using elaborate metaphors involving celestial bodies, precious stones, and flowers that probably don't exist. The language is Greek, the educated tongue, though he occasionally translates himself into Latin for the less scholarly audience members. The performance is polished, professional, the result of years of practice and natural talent. You listen, appreciating the craftsmanship even if some of the more elaborate conceits make you smile. Romans take their poetry seriously, but there's also a performative aspect to the appreciation. Knowing when to nod thoughtfully, when to smile at a clever turn of phrase, when to applaud, these are all part of being an educated Roman. The poetry reading is as much about displaying cultural competence as it is about enjoying art.
Joke 13.
Roman poetry readings were basically TED Talks, where instead of discussing innovation, you discussed how your lover's eyes were like stars, except more complicated and definitely requiring you to know Greek or risk everyone thinking you were a barbarian. After the reading, conversations break out immediately. People discuss the poet's technique, compare this performance to previous ones, debate the merits of Greek versus Latin poetry. These discussions are part of the entertainment, extending the performance into social interaction. You participate peripherally, nodding along, contributing an occasional comment that you hope sounds intelligent. You wander toward the commercial areas of the baths, the spaces where vendors sell goods and services. The baths are not just public facilities, but also marketplaces, locations where commerce happens alongside leisure. Food vendors are everywhere, selling everything from simple bread to elaborate pastries. Wine flows freely, watered or not, depending on the customer's preference and budget. You buy a meat pastry from a vendor who's set up a small grill, the smell of cooking meat drawing customers like flies. The pastry is hot, greasy, delicious in the way that food tastes better when you're hungry and not thinking too hard about ingredients. You eat while walking, observing the commercial activity happening around you. A perfume vendor has set up a display, offering scented oils in small bottles. The oils are expensive, marketed to wealthy bathers who want to smell like roses or lilies or exotic spices rather than the standard olive oil everyone else uses. The vendor is skilled at salesmanship, offering samples, describing the rare ingredients, implying that using his products will elevate the customer's status. You watch a wealthy woman examine the perfumes, her slave holding her belongings while she sniffs various bottles. She haggles half-heartedly, more out of principle than necessity, eventually purchasing 3 bottles at a price that makes you wince. The vendor wraps them carefully, treats her with the deference that wealth commands, and she departs satisfied with her purchases. Nearby, a bookseller has laid out scrolls for inspection. Romans are voracious readers, at least the educated ones are, and the baths provide a natural market for books. The selection ranges from literary classics to contemporary works, philosophical treatises to romantic poetry, practical handbooks to entertaining fiction. You browse without buying, admiring the quality of the copying work, the neat columns of text on good quality papyrus. The bookseller notices your interest and launches into a sales pitch. "This particular work is very popular," he says. "Everyone is reading it. This author is a rising star, sure to become a classic. This philosophical text will change how you think about life." You nod politely, explain that your budget doesn't currently accommodate books, and move on. The bookseller is undeterred, calling after you about a special price for craftsmen, but you're already beyond hearing range. Entertainment in the baths isn't limited to scheduled performances. Musicians wander through the complex, playing portable instruments for tips. A lyre player has set up near the gardens, his music floating through the afternoon air. The songs are popular tunes, recognizable melodies that make people smile and sometimes sing along. The musician is skilled, his fingers moving over the strings with practiced ease. You drop a small coin into his collection bowl and listen for a while. Music is everywhere in Rome. Street performers and hired entertainers, aristocratic amateur musicians, and professional virtuosos. The baths attract performers because audiences are captive, relaxed, and potentially generous. The musician seems to be doing well, his bowl accumulating coins steadily. In another area, a storyteller has gathered a small audience. He's recounting a tale from mythology, making it dramatic with voices and gestures. Children sit at the front, captivated, while adults linger at the back, pretending they're just passing through, but clearly listening. The story is familiar, a tale of gods and heroes that every Roman knows, but the storyteller makes it fresh through sheer enthusiasm and theatrical delivery. The baths also attract vendors selling practical items. A man is selling bathing supplies, strigils, of course, though you note his are lower quality than yours, oil flasks, towels of varying quality and price, sandals specifically designed for the baths with wooden soles that won't be damaged by water. Another vendor specializes in remedies for common bath-related problems, salves for abraded skin, eye drops for irritation from oil and steam, potions for the headaches that sometimes follow prolonged heat exposure. You observe the economics of bath commerce with professional interest. The vendors pay fees for the privilege of setting up in the baths, adding to the complex's revenue. They benefit from the steady stream of customers, people who are relaxed and potentially willing to spend. The baths facilitate these transactions, providing space and audience in exchange for a cut of the profits. A barber has set up shop in a corner of the tepidarium, offering haircuts and shaves. This seems an odd location for grooming, but Romans are practical about combining services. Why go to a separate barber when you can get a shave in the same place you're bathing? The barber is busy, working through a line of customers who sit patiently in the warm air, waiting their turn. You watch the barber work, admiring his skill with the bronze razor. Shaving is a delicate operation, requiring a steady hand and good light. The barber manages both, shaving his customers smooth while maintaining a stream of conversation and gossip. Barbers are notorious gossips, clearing houses for information, and this one is no exception. He shares news about local politics, rumors about upcoming building projects, speculation about who's sleeping with whom. The luxury aspects of the baths become more apparent as you explore the spaces reserved for the wealthy. Some sections of the baths charge extra fees for private bathing rooms or enhanced services. You peek into one such area and see elaborate decoration, higher quality fixtures, more attentive slaves. The wealthy can bathe alongside everyone else in the public spaces, but they can also retreat to private luxury when they prefer.
A massage area caters specifically to wealthy clients, offering services beyond the basic oil and scraping. Specialized treatments are available: hot stone massages, aromatic oil applications, treatments using exotic unguents from the far reaches of the empire. The prices are astronomical, the services elaborate, the whole operation designed to make wealthy Romans feel special and pampered. You meet a freedman who works as a luxury bath attendant, his job to cater to the whims of wealthy clients. He describes his work with a mixture of pride and cynicism. The wealthy, he says, want to feel that they're getting something ordinary people aren't, even in a public bath. His job is to provide that feeling through enhanced service, better products, and constant attention. The freedman explains the subtle gradations of luxury in the baths. There's the basic bathing experience available to everyone. Then there are upgrades, better quality oil, more skilled massage, access to quieter spaces. At the top end are truly luxurious experiences involving rare ingredients, multiple attendants, and treatment that makes the customer feel like they're receiving something approaching royal treatment. Joke 14. Roman luxury bath services were essentially ancient spa packages, where instead of cucumber water and whale sounds, you got imported Egyptian oils and someone telling you how great you were while scraping dead skin off your back with a bronze tool that cost more than most people's houses. Entertainment also happens spontaneously. In the palestra, skilled athletes sometimes give demonstrations, showing off techniques in wrestling or boxing. These aren't scheduled performances, but informal displays that draw crowds. You watch a wrestler demonstrate a throw, his partner cooperating to make the move look smooth and effortless. The watching crowd offers opinions and suggestions, turning the demonstration into a collaborative teaching moment. Games happen throughout the baths. Ball games in the exercise areas, board games in the cooler rooms, dice games in corners where gambling is technically forbidden but tacitly permitted. Romans love games, the competition, the social interaction, the combination of skill and luck. You join a ball game for a while, enjoying the simple pleasure of throwing and catching, of moving without serious purpose. The gardens host their own entertainments.
Philosophers hold informal discussions, attracting audiences who listen and occasionally participate. Today's topic is the nature of happiness, that eternal question. The philosopher argues that happiness comes from virtue, from living according to reason rather than passion. Several audience members disagree vigorously, insisting that happiness requires at least some pleasure, some enjoyment of life's physical delights. The debate is lively, good-natured despite the disagreements. This is Roman intellectual culture at work, ideas being tested through argument, truth being sought through dialectic. The baths provide space for this kind of discourse, creating impromptu academies where anyone can participate, regardless of formal education or status. You wander back toward the commercial area and find a juggler performing, keeping multiple balls in the air while balancing on one foot. The trick is impressive, drawing a small crowd. The juggler works for tips, his income depending on his ability to entertain. He adds comedy to his performance, dropping balls deliberately and making exaggerated faces, keeping the audience laughing as well as impressed. Food vendors are doing brisk business as evening approaches. The baths make people hungry, the combination of heat, exercise, and time creating appetites that need satisfying. You buy a cup of wine and a piece of fish, grilled and served on bread. The meal is simple but satisfying, eaten while standing and watching the constant flow of people through the complex. The commercial ecosystem of the baths is sophisticated, you realize. It's not just individuals selling goods, but an entire network of suppliers, vendors, and service providers, all making their living from the daily gathering of thousands of Romans. The baths create employment, generate economic activity, function as markets as well as public facilities. You think about the economics of building and maintaining such facilities. The Baths of Caracalla cost an enormous amount to construct, funded by imperial resources. But once built, they require constant revenue for maintenance, for fuel, for repairs, for the staff who keep everything running. That revenue comes from multiple sources: nominal entry fees, vendor fees, donations from wealthy patrons seeking public favor. The baths are both gift and business, public service and economic engine. They embody Rome's complicated relationship with wealth and welfare, the city's belief that citizens deserve amenities, but also that those amenities should support commerce. The result is a space that's simultaneously democratic and commercial, free to enter, but full of opportunities to spend money. As you make your final circuit of the baths, you observe the luxury and entertainment aspects one more time. A wealthy patron is hosting friends in a private area, wine flowing freely, conversation loud and cheerful. Musicians play while massage therapists work. It's a party happening within the baths, private celebration in public space. In contrast, in the main halls, ordinary Romans are enjoying their own versions of luxury. The warmth, the cleanliness, the freedom from daily obligations, these are luxuries too, accessible and democratic. A laborer soaking in a warm pool experiences his own form of luxury, different from the wealthy patrons, but no less real. You leave the baths as evening settles over Rome, your body clean, your mind entertained, your stomach satisfied by vendor food. The baths have been a complete experience today. Bathing, yes, but also culture, commerce, entertainment, social interaction, and the particular pleasure of being part of something larger than yourself. Walking home through streets that are transitioning from day to evening, you reflect on what you've observed. The baths are economic engines, employment centers, entertainment venues, and marketplaces. They're where Rome's wealth circulates, where commerce happens alongside leisure, where luxury is both displayed and democratized. Your sleep that night is accompanied by dreams of markets and music, of vendors calling their wares and poets reciting verses, of the peculiar prosperity that comes from gathering thousands of people in one place and letting them relax, spend money, and enjoy themselves. Tomorrow, you'll return to your workshop to make more strigils for more customers, but tonight, you carry the memory of the bath's vibrant commercial and cultural life. Decline, transformation, and legacy. The morning arrives with unusual news. A colleague stops by your workshop to report that one of the smaller neighborhood baths has closed, the building deteriorating beyond repair, the funds for maintenance exhausted. It's a small bath, one you've never visited, but the news troubles you. Baths closing suggests something larger changing, the city's infrastructure beginning to show its age. You've lived your entire life in a Rome where the baths seemed eternal, as permanent as the hills on which the city is built. But nothing is eternal, you realize. Not even marble and bronze. Not even institutions that seem fundamental to Roman life. The thought is unsettling, like discovering that something you thought was solid is actually fragile. Your work today is tinged with melancholy. You hammer bronze while thinking about time and change, about how the strigils you make might outlast the bath they're meant for. Bronze is durable, lasting for centuries if cared for properly. But buildings require constant maintenance, constant resources, constant commitment from the society that builds them. The afternoon finds you at the Baths of Caracalla again, but you see them differently now. You notice the small signs of wear, tiles that need replacing, a crack in a pool that's been poorly repaired, a statue that's missing part of its arm. The baths are still magnificent, still functional, but they're not immutable. They require work, attention, money, all of which assume Rome will continue to have the resources and will to maintain them. You think about the history of the baths, about how they evolved from simple washing facilities to the elaborate complexes you know. Early Romans bathed in simple tubs at home or in rivers. The first public baths were modest, functional structures without luxury. But as Rome grew wealthy from conquest, the baths grew with it, becoming showcases for Roman engineering and expressions of civic pride. The great imperial baths, like Caracalla's, represent the peak of this evolution. They're monuments to Roman power and prosperity, statements that Rome has conquered the world and brought home its wealth to share with citizens. The free admission, the elaborate decorations, the scale of the facilities, all these say, this is what Rome can do, this is what it means to be Roman. But the empire that built these baths is showing signs of strain. The frontiers are increasingly difficult to defend. The economy faces challenges. The political system creaks under pressure from ambitious generals and competing claims to power. These problems seem distant from the warm pools and marble halls, but they're connected. The baths depend on the empire's continued prosperity, on the aqueducts bringing water, on the fuel supplies keeping furnaces burning, on the taxes funding maintenance. You observe the bath's operations with new attention, thinking about their vulnerability. The water comes from aqueducts, engineering marvels that require constant maintenance. If the aqueducts fail, the baths dry up. The heat comes from furnaces burning enormous quantities of wood or charcoal, fuel that must be transported from increasingly distant forests. If the supply chains break, the baths go cold. The marble and bronze come from quarries and mines across the empire. If those sources are cut off, repairs become impossible. The baths are a system, you realize, dependent on countless other systems, all of which must function smoothly for the baths to operate. The complexity is staggering, the coordination required impressive. But complexity creates vulnerability. Any breakdown in the supply chains or administrative structures threatens the whole enterprise. Joke 15. Roman baths were basically the ancient equivalent of your smartphone, seeming simple and reliable until something in the supply chain breaks and you realize they depend on an impossibly complex system that you don't understand and definitely can't fix yourself. In the tepidarium, you strike up a conversation with an engineer who works on aqueduct maintenance. He's pessimistic about the future, describing the challenges of keeping the water flowing. The aqueducts are centuries old in some cases, requiring constant repairs. The engineering knowledge to maintain them is becoming scarcer, as older engineers retire and fewer young people learn the skills. Money for maintenance is always tight, priorities shifting toward military spending and away from infrastructure. The engineer describes specific problems: sections of aqueduct that need complete rebuilding, distribution systems that leak enormous quantities of water, settling that's changing water flow in dangerous ways. He speaks with the frustration of someone who understands what needs to be done but lacks the resources to do it. The aqueducts will last, he says, but only if they're properly maintained, and maintenance is becoming increasingly difficult. You think about what would happen if the aqueducts failed. The baths would be among the first casualties, massive consumers of water that they are. The fountains would dry up. The pools would empty. Rome would return to a time when bathing meant carrying water from wells and rivers, heating it bucket by bucket, and washing in small tubs. The loss would be more than practical. It would be symbolic. Proof that Rome could no longer maintain the infrastructure that defined Roman civilization. But perhaps the bath's decline has already begun in subtle ways. You notice that attendance seems lighter than you remember from years past. The crowds are still substantial, but you're fairly certain fewer people come now than when you first started visiting regularly. Some of this might be demographic, Rome's population fluctuating with economic conditions and political stability. But it might also reflect changing priorities, people finding other ways to spend their afternoons or lacking the resources for even nominal bath fees. The quality of services seems to be declining too. Massage therapists are less skilled or less attentive. The oil provided freely isn't as good quality as it once was. Small repairs take longer to complete. These are minor things, easily overlooked individually, but collectively they suggest an institution under stress.
You wander through the libraries and notice that the book collection seems smaller than you remember. Scrolls have been borrowed and not replaced, and the shelves show gaps. The librarian, when asked, explains that the funds for acquiring new texts have been reduced. The library continues to function, but it's slowly shrinking, its collection eroding through attrition. In the gardens, you notice that some of the plantings look neglected. A flower bed has more weeds than flowers. A tree shows signs of disease that no one has treated. The fountains still flow, but one has developed a leak that's creating a muddy patch on the path. These are small failures, maintenance deferred, standards slipping degree by degree. The changes are subtle enough that most bathers probably don't notice them. The baths still provide hot water, cold plunges, exercise space, and social gathering places. They're still magnificent by any reasonable standard, but if you know what to look for, if you remember how things used to be, you can see the trajectory. The baths are still standing, still functioning, but they're entering a long, slow decline that might take decades or centuries to complete. You think about what comes after the baths, about what future Romans will do when these facilities finally fail. Will they build new ones, maintaining the tradition in some form? Or will they adapt to life without public bathing, finding other ways to clean themselves and gather socially? The answer probably depends on factors you can't predict: Rome's future prosperity, political stability, cultural priorities, technological changes. In the caldarium, you meet an elderly man who remembers the bath's inauguration decades ago. He describes the celebration, the crowds, the sense of pride in this magnificent new facility. He's watched the baths age along with himself, seen them move from novelty to institution to something taken for granted. He's philosophical about their future, noting that everything changes, that permanence is illusion, and that Rome has survived worse than declining infrastructure. The old man tells stories about earlier baths he remembers from his youth, facilities that were eventually abandoned or converted to other uses. The cycle has happened before, he reminds you. Rome built baths, used them for generations, and then moved on when circumstances changed. The Baths of Caracalla will likely follow the same pattern, magnificent for their time, but not eternal. You spend time in the frigidarium thinking about cold water and endings. The plunge is as shocking as always. The water is cold, but you find yourself wondering how much longer the aqueducts will maintain this temperature. How many more generations of Romans will experience this particular form of refreshment? The thought adds poignancy to the moment,
makes you more conscious of the present because the future is uncertain. As evening approaches, you make a final circuit of the baths, trying to memorize details you've always taken for granted. The way light falls through the caldarium windows, the echo of voices in the changing rooms, the particular smell of olive oil mixed with marble dust and human sweat. These are the sensory details of Roman life, the texture of being a citizen in the greatest city in the world. If the baths decline, these experiences will become memories, stories told to grandchildren who might not believe that such places once existed. You leave the baths feeling melancholic, but also grateful. The baths are still here, still functioning, still providing their peculiar combination of hygiene, health, entertainment, and social connection. Then comes the caldarium, and the heat hits you like a wall as you enter. The air is thick, almost visible, carrying moisture that beads immediately on your skin. The room is dimmer than the tepidarium, lit by bronze lamps that create shadows dancing across the marble walls. In the center, a large hot pool sends up clouds of steam. The water is hot enough to make you wince, but Romans pride themselves on tolerance for heat. To complain would mark you as weak, possibly foreign, definitely suspicious. You ease yourself into the water, step by careful step, until you're submerged to your shoulders. The heat is intense, but not unbearable. Your muscles protest briefly, then surrender to the warmth. Other bathers lounge around the pool's edge or float in the water, their faces red and sheened with sweat. Some have brought cups of wine, which seems like a questionable health choice, but no one's asking for your medical opinion. Joke 2. Romans believed hot water was medically beneficial, which it is, though their habit of sitting in scalding pools until they nearly fainted suggests they believed more was always more, like ancient gym rats who refused to acknowledge the concept of overdoing it. Time loses meaning in the caldarium. Minutes or hours might pass while you float in the heat, occasionally moving to a different spot in the pool to find a temperature that feels less like sitting in soup. Conversations happen in bursts between long silences. A businessman discusses a contract. Students recite poetry. Someone starts singing, then stops, remembering that singing in the baths is one of the few things explicitly frowned upon. Eventually, you drag yourself from the hot pool, your skin wrinkled and pink, and make your way to the frigidarium. The cold room is smaller, with a plunge pool that makes you hesitate. You've done this before. You know what's coming, but knowledge doesn't make it easier. You jump in. The cold hits like a physical blow, driving the air from your lungs in a gasp that you're not alone in making. The water is genuinely cold, fed by aqueducts bringing water from mountain streams. Your heart hammers, your skin tightens, and for a moment you question every decision that led you to this point. Then the initial shock passes, and the cold becomes almost pleasant, numbing and sharp at the same time. You don't stay long. No one stays long in the frigidarium unless they're trying to prove something. You climb out, water streaming from your body, and an attendant offers you something Romans call a towel, which functions more as a theoretical concept than actual absorbent material. Linen doesn't dry things so much as redistribute moisture into a thin, even layer. You do your best, then give up and let the air do the work. Your circuit of the baths isn't complete. There are pools you haven't visited, rooms you haven't explored, and you've barely touched the social opportunities available. But first, you need to address the growing sound of your stomach, which has realized that exercise and temperature extremes have depleted your energy. The baths have thought of this, naturally. They have thought of everything. The smell of food draws you toward the arcade that runs along one side of the complex. Here, vendors have set up stalls selling everything from simple bread and oil to elaborate pastries dripping with honey. The Romans love honey. They put it on everything, except, presumably, other honey. You buy a flatbread topped with cheese and fish sauce, the combination better than it sounds, plus a cup of wine mixed with water, because drinking straight wine during the day marks you as either a barbarian or a very committed alcoholic. You eat standing up, watching the flow of people through the baths. The crowd has shifted since you arrived. The afternoon is moving toward evening, and the clientele is changing. More women arrive, taking advantage of the hours set aside for them. Rome's baths are usually gender segregated by time rather than space, men using them in the afternoon, women in the morning and evening. Some smaller baths have separate facilities. The larger ones, like Caracalla's, simply run shifts. A group of women passes by, their conversation a rapid-fire exchange about someone named Claudia, who apparently made a scene at a dinner party. They're followed by an older woman with 2 slaves carrying her bathing supplies in bronze containers that look more expensive than your house. She walks with the confidence of someone who knows exactly how much money she's wearing and assumes everyone else knows too. You finish your food and wander into the library. Yes, the baths have a library. They also have gardens, art galleries, and lecture halls. The Romans treat bathing as the center point of a full afternoon's entertainment, not just the main event. The library is quieter than the bathing rooms, lined with scrolls stored in wooden cases. A few readers sit on benches, unrolling texts with the careful movements of people who know that carelessness costs money. You pick up a scroll at random. It's philosophical commentary on the nature of happiness, which seems appropriately ironic to read in a building dedicated to physical pleasure. You read a few lines, understand about half of them, and return the scroll to its place. Philosophy is better in theory than in practice, you decide, especially when your brain is still slightly cooked from the caldarium. The gardens offer a different kind of respite. Trees planted in massive pots create patches of shade. Fountains splash into pools where the water is kept moving to prevent mosquitoes from breeding, a detail the Romans have worked out through trial, error, and presumably many itchy evenings. You sit on a stone bench near a fountain, watching water cascade over carved dolphins. An elderly man sits beside you, uninvited but not unwelcome. This is how things work in the baths. Privacy exists only in designated places. Everywhere else is fair game for conversation, business proposals, or lengthy explanations of political theories. The man wants to talk about the emperor. He has opinions. Many opinions. You nod at appropriate intervals while letting his words wash over you like the fountain's water, soothing and continuous. Joke 3. The Roman baths were democracy's waiting room where anyone could talk to anyone about anything, which is lovely in theory until you're trapped by someone explaining their comprehensive plan to reorganize the grain dole using a system that involves significantly more bureaucracy than grain. The afternoon is aging toward evening. Light slants through the high windows at different angles now, catching dust motes and making the steam in the caldarium glow. You make another circuit of the rooms, this time moving slower, letting each space work its particular magic on your body. The contrast between hot and cold, dry and wet, has left you feeling lighter somehow, as if you've sweat out not just dirt, but also worry.
In the tepidarium, you recognize a neighbor. He's a fuller, someone who cleans and processes cloth for a living. His work requires him to soak fabrics in containers of human urine, collecting the stuff from public urinals placed around the city. The baths are his respite, the place where he can wash away the smell of his trade and be just another Roman spending his afternoon in approved leisure. You exchange nods, the understanding between workers who know the value of a space where occupation doesn't define you. A massage is next, because no bathing experience is complete without someone kneading your muscles like bread dough. You pay a few coins to one of the masseurs working in the tepidarium. He's a Greek freedman with hands like iron and a complete lack of sympathy for your protests that maybe, possibly, that particular muscle doesn't need quite that much attention. He finds knots you didn't know you had and eliminates them through what feels like targeted violence. You emerge from the massage feeling simultaneously wonderful and assaulted. The baths are starting to empty as evening approaches. The first shift of bathers has left, heading home for dinner or to the taverns that line the streets outside. You're not quite ready to leave yet. There's something addictive about the baths, about the warmth and the company, and the sense of being part of something larger than yourself.
You return to the tepidarium one more time, finding a spot near a wall vent where warm air flows steadily. You think about the building around you, about the enormous amount of work required to keep it running. Somewhere below your feet, enslaved workers are feeding the furnaces. Water is being pumped from the aqueducts into the reservoirs that supply the pools. Cleaners are working in the areas you've already left, scraping up oil and sweeping floors. The baths never really close. Even at night, when the doors are locked to bathers, work continues to prepare for the next day's crowd. The marble under your feet is worn smooth by thousands of other feet over the years since these baths opened. The Baths of Caracalla are new, relatively speaking. They've only been open for a few years, but already they've established themselves as one of Rome's great gathering places, capable of handling thousands of people per day. When you tell your grandchildren about these baths someday, assuming you survive long enough to have grandchildren, they'll probably still be standing. Stone and marble have a permanence that makes individual lives seem brief. You finally dress in the apodyterium, pleased to find your clothes still in their niche, unguarded but unmolested. The fabric feels strange after hours of going without it, too rough and too confining. Your skin still tingles from the temperature changes in the massage. You smell like olive oil and the particular mix of scents that cling to everyone who spent time in the baths: wood smoke, perfume, marble dust, and something you can't quite name but that means Rome. The street outside is loud after the echo chamber of the baths. Vendors are selling grilled meat and vegetables. Musicians play for coins. A group of young men argues about something that seems very important to them and incomprehensible to everyone else. You join the flow of people heading back toward the center of the city, your body tired but content, your mind drifting toward dinner and sleep. Joke 4. The Romans believed spending several hours alternating between extreme temperatures, scraping yourself with metal tools, and getting punched by a professional made you healthier. And honestly, compared to their medical alternatives, they might have been onto something. As you walk, you realize you've forgotten to appreciate the absurdity of what you've just done. You spent hours doing nothing productive, which in Roman society is considered not just acceptable, but necessary. In a city that prides itself on conquest, on building, on the relentless expansion of power, the baths represent something different. The idea that life should contain pleasure for its own sake, that citizens deserve spaces to just exist without purpose beyond existence itself. Of course, this philosophy depends on having enough enslaved people and conquered territories to support the lifestyle, a reality that's easy to forget while floating in warm water. But that's a complexity for another day. Right now, you're a Roman who's been to the baths, who's exercised and soaked and scraped and talked with strangers, and you feel exactly as you're supposed to feel, like a civilized person in the greatest city in the world. The sun is setting, painting the marble buildings in shades of orange and pink. Temple columns glow. The Tiber River catches the light like a ribbon of bronze. Somewhere other baths are still open, still welcoming their own crowds of bathers. The baths of Trajan, smaller but elegant. The baths of Diocletian, which won't be built for another 70 years, but which will be even larger than Caracalla's. The neighborhood baths, hundreds of them, serving their local communities with less marble and more practicality. You pass a fountain where people are filling jugs with water for cooking and washing. The same aqueducts that feed the baths feed these public fountains, part of Rome's gift to its citizens. Water, that most essential resource, flows freely for anyone who wants it. You could drink from this fountain, and the water would be the same water that filled the pools you've been lounging at all afternoon, clean and cold from its journey through the aqueducts. Your house is small, by contrast with the baths, a few rooms around a central courtyard shared with 3 other families. No hypocaust heating, no marble floors, no statues of gods and heroes, but it's yours, or at least you rent it, and it feels welcoming after hours in the public spaces. You light an oil lamp, heat some soup left from yesterday, and settle onto your bed, which is essentially a wooden frame with a thin mattress and a blanket. Sleep comes easily, your body satisfied in a way that physical exertion and thorough cleaning can provide. You drift off thinking about the baths, about the way the light looked coming through the steam, about the conversations you overheard and the ones you participated in. Tomorrow you'll go back to work, back to the routines that fill your days, but today belonged to the baths, to the very Roman idea that even ordinary people deserve extraordinary spaces.
In your dreams, you're floating in warm water again, weightless and content,
while marble dolphins spout water in endless streams and voices echo off the domed ceiling like a song without words. The dreams of a Roman citizen after a day at the baths are probably not much different from yours right now. Warm, comfortable, and satisfied with the simple miracle of hot water and good company. Daily routines and social rhythms. Morning arrives in Rome with the sound of carts. The city bans wheeled traffic during the day, so everything that needs moving by cart happens at night, creating a constant rumble of wood on stone that serves as an alarm clock for anyone trying to sleep. You wake in darkness, the kind of darkness that modern people never really experience, broken only by the faint glow of street lamps kept burning through the night by public slaves. Your first thought is about the baths, though you won't return until afternoon. That's the rhythm of Roman life, dividing neatly into work and leisure, obligation and pleasure. The baths represent the pleasure half, but the work half must be completed first. You're a craftsman, someone who makes the bronze strigils that bathers use to scrape themselves clean. Ironic, perhaps, that you make the tools for bathing while spending almost as much time in the baths as your wealthiest customers. Breakfast is simple: bread dipped in wine, a handful of olives, some cheese. Romans don't make a ceremony of the morning meal. That energy is saved for dinner, the important meal, the one where families gather and business is discussed. You eat standing up, looking out into the courtyard where your neighbors are beginning their own morning routines. The woman upstairs is arguing with someone, her voice carrying clearly in the morning stillness. The family below has a rooster that has very specific opinions about when dawn should begin, regardless of the sun's schedule. The workshop is a short walk through streets that are already busy despite the early hour. Bakeries have been working since before midnight, their ovens heating the stone buildings around them. The smell of fresh bread competes with less pleasant scents. The previous night's cart traffic has left its share of animal waste in the streets, and the public urinals are reaching their capacity before the morning collection. Rome is a city of 10,000 smells, not all of them pleasant, many of them powerful enough to make your eyes water. Your workshop is shared with two other craftsmen, one who makes oil lamps and another who specializes in bronze mirrors. The space is narrow, barely wide enough for 3 workbenches and the small forge in the back. Light comes from the open front during the day, supplemented by oil lamps that create more smoke than illumination. You settle into your spot and begin the careful work of shaping bronze into curves that will fit comfortably in a hand while maintaining the strength to scrape oil from skin. The work is repetitive but skilled. Bronze is expensive, mistakes costly. You heat, hammer, shape, cool, and polish each strigil to specifications that your customers expect. The wealthy want fancy strigils, decorated with designs or inlaid with other metals. The common people want strigils that work and don't cost a week's wages. You make both, adjusting your prices to match the customer's purse and your own need to eat regularly. As you work, your mind wanders to the baths. You think about the different sections, about the routines that structure each visit. The baths operate on a schedule as precise as any military campaign. They open in the afternoon, typically around the 8th hour by Roman reckoning, which translates to roughly 2 in the afternoon by modern clocks. This timing isn't arbitrary. It allows people to complete their morning work and still have hours of daylight for bathing. The morning hours are reserved for women, though this varies by bathhouse. Some of the larger establishments run separate facilities, but most simply alternate times. Women have different bathing customs, different social expectations, but the basic routine remains similar: exercise, oil, scraping, hot water, cold plunge, conversation, and leisure. You've never witnessed the women's hours, obviously, but your female customers describe them with the same enthusiasm the men show. Joke 5. The Romans solved the co-ed gym problem by just giving everyone different hours, which seems reasonable until you realize this meant if you wanted to visit the baths with your spouse, you needed to go separately and then meet for dinner to compare notes on the temperature of the caldarium. Your work is interrupted by a customer, a wealthy merchant who wants a custom strigil made from silver-plated bronze with his name engraved on the handle. The man describes his requirements in exhausting detail, including specifications for the curve that suggest he spent considerable time thinking about optimal scraping angles.
You nod, take notes on a wax tablet, quote a price that makes him wince but not walk away, and promise delivery in 2 weeks. The sun is rising higher now, visible through the workshop's opening. The street outside grows busier. Slaves are running errands for their masters, carrying messages or fetching items from shops. Free workers are heading to construction sites, to the docks, to the 100 different jobs that keep a city of over 1 million people functioning. You hear fragments of conversation as people pass, gossip about neighbors, complaints about prices, discussions of politics and entertainment. At midday, you take a break. The forge is hot, the air in the workshop stifling. You step outside and buy a cup of wine from a tavern that really is just a counter with a few amphora and a man who's been serving the same corner for 30 years. The wine is rough, barely watered, but it clears the dust from your throat. You drink standing up, watching a group of school children being herded past by their pedagogue, a Greek slave responsible for their education and behavior. The boys are reciting something in Greek, their voices a rhythmic chant. You think about education in the baths, about how they intertwine in Roman life. The baths have libraries, yes, but more importantly, they have space for discussion and debate. Young men learn rhetoric and philosophy not just from teachers, but from conversations overheard in the tepidarium, from arguments conducted in the palaestra, from the constant flow of ideas that moves through the baths like water through the aqueducts.
The afternoon approaches slowly, minutes marked by the movement of shadows across the street. You finish a strigil, polish it until it gleams, set it aside with satisfaction. The work is good work, honest work, the kind that leaves you with tangible proof of your day's effort. But your mind is already moving ahead to the baths, to the moment when work ends and pleasure begins. Finally, the sun reaches the angle that marks the 8th hour. You clean your workspace, bank the forge's coals, lock away your tools and materials in the chest you share with your workshop partners. The oil lamp maker is already gone, having left an hour earlier to run some errand. The mirror maker works on, oblivious to time, bent over a piece that requires attention he's unwilling to interrupt. The walk to the baths takes you through the heart of Rome. The streets are fuller now, everyone heading toward leisure in one form or another. The baths, the theaters, the forums where people gather to talk and trade. You pass the amphitheater, where games are scheduled for tomorrow, the advertisements painted on walls promising exotic animals and skilled gladiators. You pass temples where priests are conducting afternoon rituals, their prayers rising like smoke from the altars. The Baths of Caracalla loom ahead, even more impressive in the direct sunlight than in the softer morning hours. The building is faced with marble of different colors, white, green, pink, creating patterns that please the eye and remind visitors that Rome has conquered the world and brought home its stones. The entrance is crowded now, the afternoon shift arriving en masse, people eager to shed their work clothes and their work identities. You enter the changing room and immediately feel the familiar shift in atmosphere. Inside the baths, you're not a bronze worker with stained hands and cheap clothes. You're a Roman citizen, equal to everyone else in your lack of clothing and your access to the facilities. This transformation happens every day, but it never quite loses its small thrill, this momentary elevation to full participation in Roman life. The changing room attendant today is someone you recognize, a freedman who works here most days and knows the regular visitors. He nods to you, indicates an empty niche, and returns to his conversation with another bather about yesterday's chariot races. The Blues won, apparently, though the victory is disputed due to some incident involving a wheel that may or may not have been sabotaged. Chariot racing politics are complex enough to require their own category of expertise. You strip and store your clothes, keeping your money tucked in your sandal. The changing room is loud with conversation, men greeting friends, making plans, arguing about something that happened in the forum this morning. You catch fragments. And then he had the nerve to claim, 3 amphorae, completely destroyed. I told him the price before we started. The baths are where Rome talks to itself, where information spreads faster than it does through any official channel. Today, you decide to start with the palaestra,
to work up a proper sweat before hitting the heated rooms. The exercise yard is busy, more crowded than yesterday. A wrestling match has drawn spectators, two men grappling with the intense focus of either serious athletes or serious gambling debts. You watch for a moment, appreciating the skill, then move toward the weights area. The halters are waiting, stone weights worn smooth by countless hands. You pick up a pair and begin the swinging motion that builds arm strength. The movement is meditative, repetitive, letting your mind drift while your body works. Around you, other men are doing the same, or practicing with the heavier weights, or engaging in exercises that require a level of flexibility you're pretty sure you never possessed even as a child. A trainer walks past, one of the gymnasium slaves who work here, offering advice and correction to anyone who looks like they need it. He stops to watch you for a moment, makes a small adjustment to your grip, nods approval, and moves on. The trainers are skilled professionals, many of them former athletes themselves, valued for their knowledge of bodies and movement. They're enslaved, yes, but they occupy a privileged position within that hierarchy, teaching free citizens skills that free citizens consider important. You finish your set and wander toward the ball game. The game is informal, rules being negotiated on the fly, teams shifting as players join or leave. You catch the ball once, throw it back, and then step aside to let faster people take over. Your coordination is adequate for walking and working, less suited for sports requiring reflexes and spatial awareness. The palestra's sand is warm under your feet, heated by the sun that pours down through the open roof. You can feel sweat beginning to form, mixing with the dust that covers everything in the exercise area. This is good, the Romans believe. Sweat opens the pores, prepares the skin for cleaning, releases bad humors from the body. Modern science has different explanations for sweat, but the end result is similar. You're getting dirtier in preparation for getting cleaner. Joke 6. The Romans believed the best way to get clean was first to get so dirty that cleaning became a genuine accomplishment, like training for a marathon by running through mud while carrying weights. Except somehow this made sense to an entire civilization for centuries. After sufficient exercise, you head to the oil containers. These are large ceramic vessels placed strategically around the baths, filled with olive oil for public use. The oil isn't free exactly, but it's included in the nominal fee for entry or provided by wealthy patrons seeking public appreciation. You pour a generous amount into your palm and begin working it into your skin. The oil is cool at first, then warms from contact with your body heat. You coat your arms, chest, legs, working methodically. Other bathers are doing the same, or have brought slaves to perform this service, the slaves working efficiently to cover their masters from neck to ankles. You prefer to do it yourself. It's part of the ritual, the self-care that makes the baths feel like an active process rather than a passive one.
The strigil comes next, your own tool, one you made yourself with extra care. The curve fits your hand perfectly, the edge sharp enough to scrape effectively, but not so sharp it risks breaking skin. You begin with your arms, drawing the strigil along the muscle, collecting the oil-dirt mixture in the curve. The motion is satisfying, visceral proof that you're removing something unwanted from your skin. You work systematically, arms, chest, legs, feet. The parts you can't reach yourself, you leave for now. Later, in the tepidarium, you'll ask another bather for assistance or hire one of the bath slaves who offer scraping services. Romans are practical about bodies. If you can't reach your own back, someone else's hands are just hands, nothing more complicated than that. The mixture that comes off your skin is gray-brown, a combination of oil, sweat, and the dust of Rome. You wipe it onto the floor like everyone else, adding to the collection that will eventually be scraped up and either discarded or sold. Yes, sold. Some people believe the scrapings from gymnasium floors have medicinal properties. The Romans will try anything once, twice if it might cure impotence or baldness. Now you're ready for the heated rooms. The transition from the open air of the palestra to the enclosed warmth of the tepidarium is gradual, carefully designed.
You walk through a passage where the temperature increases degree by degree, allowing your body to adjust. The Romans understand thermal shock, even if they don't use that term. They know that plunging directly from cold to hot or hot to cold can cause problems ranging from dizziness to death. The tepidarium today is moderately crowded, clusters of men standing or sitting, some being scraped by slaves or bath attendants, others just enjoying the ambient warmth. The light is softer here than in the palestra, filtered through windows set high in the walls. Steam from the caldarium drifts in, not enough to obscure vision, but enough to blur edges, to make the room feel dreamlike. You find a spot near a wall vent and stand, letting the warm air flow over you. The heat soaks into muscles that spent the morning hunched over a forge. Your shoulders relax, your hands unclench. You weren't aware you were tense until the tension starts to release. This is the gift of the baths, this conscious relaxation, this permission to stop being productive and just exist in warmth and comfort. A conversation starts near you, and you half listen while studying the ceiling mosaics. The baths are decorated throughout with art, some of it quite fine, some of it merely adequate. The tepidarium's mosaics show athletic scenes: wrestlers, runners, boxers. The figures are stylized but energetic, captured mid-motion in tiny colored tiles. You've walked under these mosaics dozens of times, but still find new details to notice. The conversation beside you is about business, two merchants discussing shipping routes and tariffs. They speak in the casual way of people who assume no one is listening or who don't care if anyone is. You learned about troubles on the eastern routes, about a competitor who's undercutting prices, about a shipment of grain that arrived damaged. It's boring and fascinating in equal measure, this glimpse into commercial operations you'll never participate in. Time passes unmeasured. The tepidarium discourages urgency. You move when you feel ready to move. Transition to the next room when your body says it's time. Some bathers spend hours in the tepidarium, conducting business meetings or social gatherings in the warmth. You're more restless than that, more inclined to keep moving through the bathing sequence. The caldarium beckons with its promise of heat that borders on excessive. You enter and immediately feel sweat beading on your skin. The room is large, domed, with windows that create shafts of light through the steam. The hot pool dominates the center, its water maintained at a temperature that ancient physicians insist is healthful despite the way it makes your heart race and your vision swim slightly. You ease into the pool, grateful that it's deep enough to sit with water up to your chest. The heat is immediate and total. Your skin flushes red, your breathing shallows. Around you, other bathers are in various states of heat tolerance. Some look comfortable, even bored. Others look like they're enduring a trial, which isn't entirely inaccurate. The Romans valued tolerance for discomfort, viewing it as a form of strength. The conversations in the caldarium are different from those in the cooler rooms. The heat makes people languid, slows their speech, softens their edges. A man floats nearby, his eyes closed, his face peaceful. Another sits on the pool's edge, his legs dangling in the water, conducting a desultory conversation with a friend about someone's daughter and someone else's son, and a proposed marriage that may or may not happen depending on dowry negotiations. You stay in the hot pool longer than you probably should, until your fingers are wrinkled and your head feels light. The Romans believed this is beneficial, that sweating in hot water purges toxins and balances humors. Modern medicine would suggest you're primarily just getting dehydrated, but the sensation is undeniably pleasant, a kind of voluntary fever that leaves you feeling purged and clean. When you finally climb out, your legs are unsteady for a moment. You sit on a bench near the edge, letting your heart rate slow, feeling the air cool your skin. A slave offers you a cup of water, which you accept gratefully. The water is cool but not cold, brought from the aqueducts but allowed to sit until it reaches a temperature that won't shock your heated system. The frigidarium is next, though you take your time reaching it.
The path from the caldarium to the frigidarium is a journey through temperature zones, each room slightly cooler than the last. This is intentional, designed to prevent the kind of shock that could stop a heart. The Romans have learned through experience that while contrasting temperatures are healthful, extremes need to be approached with caution. The frigidarium's pool looks uninviting. Its water's so clear you can see the blue tiles at the bottom, the kind of clarity that comes from water that's genuinely cold. You don't hesitate, because hesitation makes it worse. You jump in, and the cold erases every thought in your head except for the immediate, urgent desire to get back out.
But you don't get out. You stay, breathing through the cold, feeling your body adjust in stages. First, the surface of your skin goes numb. Then, underneath, a deeper warmth begins to build, your body generating heat to combat the cold. After a minute, maybe two, the cold becomes less of an assault and more of a sensation, sharp and clean and strangely exhilarating. Other bathers are in the pool with you, some gasping, some laughing, all sharing this peculiar moment of voluntary discomfort. There's a camaraderie in the frigidarium, a sense that you're all in this together, all choosing to shock your systems for the sake of health, and the peculiar pleasure that comes after the cold. You emerge from the pool feeling alive in a way that's hard to describe. Your skin tingles, your blood feels like it's moving faster, your thoughts are sharp and clear. The frigidarium's effects are temporary, but while they last, you feel capable of anything. This is why Romans loved the baths, you think, not just for the cleaning or the socializing, but for this sensation of being fully present in your body, fully aware of being alive. The rest of your bath follows a leisurely pattern. You wander through the various rooms, spending time wherever feels right. You get a second scraping in the tepidarium, paying a bath attendant to reach the places you couldn't manage yourself. The attendant is efficient, professional. His strigil moves in practiced strokes that remove oil and dead skin with mechanical precision. You visit the laconicum, the dry sweating room, which is even hotter than the caldarium, but without the humidity. The heat here is savage, uncompromising, the kind that makes breathing feel like a conscious effort. You don't stay long, even Romans have limits, and you're not interested in finding yours today. As evening approaches, the baths begin to shift their character again. The afternoon crowd is thinning, heading home for dinner or to evening entertainments. Soon the women's hours will begin, and the whole complex will transform. Same spaces, but different energy. You've stayed longer than you intended, the hours slipping away and the pleasant routine of hot, cold, warm, rest, repeat. You make one final circuit of the bathing rooms, a last visit to the tepidarium to warm yourself before facing the evening air, a quick splash in a cool pool to rinse away the final traces of oil. You dry yourself with the inadequate linen towel, dress in the changing room, and step out into a room that's preparing for evening. The streets are busy with dinner traffic. Food vendors are setting up for the evening trade, grilling meat and vegetables that fill the air with smoke and savory scents. Taverns are opening their doors, and the sound of conversation and laughter spills into the streets. You feel the contrast between the bath's calm order and the street's cheerful chaos. You stop at a tavern for dinner, too relaxed to cook for yourself. The meal is simple: grilled fish, bread, olives, and wine that's better than the midday stuff, but still nothing special. You eat at a counter, standing shoulder to shoulder with other diners, everyone focused on their food and their own thoughts. The walk home takes you through neighborhoods that are settling into evening rhythms. Families are visible through open doors, gathered for dinner, their conversations mixing with the street noise. Temples are closing, priests extinguishing altar fires and securing valuables. Shopkeepers are pulling closed their shutters, ending the business day. Your own home welcomes you with its familiar smells and shadows. You light lamps, bank the fire in the small brazier that heats water and cooks food. Your body feels tired in the best way, muscles that have been worked and heated and cooled, now ready for rest. You lie down on your bed, pulling a blanket over yourself despite the warm evening, and feel sleep approaching. Your last conscious thoughts are of the baths, of the marble columns and the warm pools, of the conversations overheard and the moments of solitary peace. Tomorrow you'll wake and work and return to the baths again, the cycle repeating like water flowing through aqueducts, constant and reliable, and somehow essential to what it means to be Roman. The water still flows, the fires still burn, the marble halls still echo with voices and laughter. For now, at least, the baths endure, offering their gift of warmth and cleanliness and community to anyone who walks through their doors. And so our tour of the Roman baths comes to an end. We've walked the marble floors, plunged into cold pools, sweated in hot rooms, and witnessed a slice of daily life in ancient Rome. The baths were more than just places to get clean. They were the heart of Roman social life, centers of health and culture, spaces where the rigid hierarchies of Roman society softened just enough to allow for something approaching equality. If you enjoyed this journey through time, remember to like and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Leave a comment about what surprised you most about Roman bathing culture, or tell me what other aspects of ancient daily life you'd like to explore. Until next time, sleep well and maybe appreciate your modern shower just a little bit more, even if it lacks the social opportunities and architectural grandeur of a Roman bath.
The hypocausts are cooling now, the pools are emptying, the marble is quiet. And in the silence of these ancient halls, you can almost hear the echoes of a civilization that understood something profound, that taking care of the body and gathering with others aren't luxuries but necessities, that cleanliness and community are intertwined, that a society is measured not just by its conquests, but how it treats its citizens in the ordinary moments of daily life. Good night from ancient Rome. May your dreams be warm, your pools perfectly heated, and your strigil always sharp enough to scrape away the day's worries.